Are we on start? Lovely. Good afternoon, everybody. Hello and welcome to everybody in the room and people online today for our session, What Are Teachers Really Thinking and How We Know? So my name's Emily Reid. I'm Assistant Head Teacher at St Bernard's Primary Nursery School in Ellesmere Port, and I'm also Curriculum Lead, and for over probably more than 7 years now, I've been working alongside Chester Zoo in partnership to develop our curriculum around our community and the needs of our young people. So before I introduce you to the panel, I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about the background of conservation and sustainability education at the moment. So currently, as you may know, there's a huge absence of any curriculum work around conservation and sustainability in the national curriculum. It only comes in at Key Stage 3 in science, but very, very tiny amount. And the Rebooting Education report last year talked about there was over 6,000 teachers surveyed, and at least 2/3 felt that they didn't receive enough training around environmental education. UNESCO also did a similar survey, but with 58,000 teachers across the world, and only 1/3 felt that they could really confidently explain the issues around climate change to young people. So there is a huge issue there around professional development for teachers. And the DFE are asking that by 2025, that every school in England has a sustainability lead. That's over 24,000 teachers. So we know currently there are not enough systems in place to support schools with this. The government wants to deliver this high-quality, world-leading education around, climate change and conservation and sustainability. But despite that, we know there's a huge appetite across our schools from teachers who really want to empower our young people and develop the skills of the young people, our communities, for the future of our planet. So we are quite excited to be having this conversation this afternoon, despite the, the current climate in education as well. So I'm going to introduce our panel. So first here we have Professor Janet Lord, and she's I've got to get this title right, all the words in the right order, the Deputy Pro-Vice-Chancellor for Health and Education at Manchester Metropolitan University. We've also got Dr. Jess Tipton, Head of the National Education Nature Parks at the Natural Museum. And then we've got Richard Dunne, who's Director of the Harmony Project. So the panel are just going to introduce themselves now and talk a little bit about their role and how they're involved with environmental education. So we'll pass on to Janet first. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. So well done. You did get them in the right order, which is more than I do very often. So yes, I'm Professor of Education at Manchester Met University, which is just down the road. And at Manchester Met, we're super proud to be a top 3 sustainable university in the People and Planet University League. We're also one of the biggest teacher training providers in the UK. And we train hundreds and hundreds of teachers, both primary and secondary teachers, every year. And one of the things that I like about that work is that it has a kind of exponential impact, because we work with the teachers and then they work with other teachers and they work with young people and so on. And one of our key partners is Chester Zoo, and we're really, really delighted that we do a lot of work with Chester Zoo. They're key for us and also key for the region as well. So really happy to be here today. Thank you very much, Emily.
Thank you. So I'm Jess. So at the moment, as Emily said, I'm head of the National Education Nature Park. So I work for the Natural History Museum because we are the lead partner delivering this project for the Department for Education. So we are one of the first projects that has come out of the Department for Education Climate and Sustainability Strategy, launched a year ago. And then prior to that, I was a modern languages teacher and set up and ran the UK Schools Sustainability Network to bring together teaching staff, all school staff, and I think there's a key point that it can be any member of staff that's interested in sustainability and having a go at driving it forward, and also students, pupils from across UK schools. So I've sort of seen it from both sides, if you like, from the kind of stakeholder, the coalface, and we took a bunch of teenagers to COP26 in Glasgow, and they spoke on panels and got really stuck in there. And then prior to that, I worked for DEFRA as well for 10 years on and off, but my sort of training is languages, and did research on on Russia and international climate policy, which seems funny looking back now. Yeah, so sort of coming at, I had lots of different hats on, obviously, so coming at this from different directions.
Thank you, Jess. Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Richard. I was a state school head teacher for 18 years, and during that time was trying to work out how to get the balance between the academic stuff and the applied, the lived, the in-nature world. And I think my message very strongly today is a both and. We don't need to separate them and see that if you focus on the academic, you then can't do this stuff. It's really important we get the balance right between the two, as you know so well. So I was really interested when I became a head teacher to say, okay, how do we start to do this? We started with a particular project, particularly more on something like energy and how we reduce energy as a community, taking it into our families and radically reducing our energy consumption. And then we moved to food, growing food on our field and really starting to engage with our community of allotment growers around that. And then I said to my staff, actually we need it to be in every single half term throughout our primary years, from early years to year 6, so that they build an understanding of nature, connection to nature, and what I now call principles of harmony, how nature works to create harmonious, balanced systems that can guide us in a sustainable way of life. So I left being a head teacher 5 years ago, and now I run the Harmony Project, working with schools to really explore how to bridge that gap between the two. I think just one final point on that. I see teachers get excited by learning again when they do the sort of work that you do. And so many of them feel like they're exhausted right now. And we know the pressures. So how can we bring a bit of life back to what they do and really excite them about the power of this kind of learning?
Well said, Richard. Brilliant. Yeah, that's what it's all about. So as you can see, we've got a real wealth of experience on our panel here. So we're going to dive straight into our first kind of 2 key questions. So the first one is, what are the biggest challenges for the teaching profession at the moment relevant to engaging with the environmental sector or environmental issues? And what should maybe the environmental sector be doing to help? You know, how could they help teachers be more effectively in supporting what they really, really need? So can we start with you, Janet? Is that okay?
Thanks, Emily. So I guess the first thing is to say, just picking up what you said, teachers are crawling towards the end of term at the moment. It feels like we're ready to break up for Christmas. We're in a climate with new government. It's quite interesting to look and see what's happening. And I think there are definite green shoots. There was some talk last week, I think a couple of weeks ago, Kevin Collins talking about, actually, maybe we need to be trying to give some agency back to teachers. And that was really, really nice to hear. It was just a little nod in a speech, but it was a nod nonetheless. So I think picking up really what you said, Emily, we know that teachers have energy and willingness and commitment to do this work. And they're very keen to empower young people doing it as well, because teachers absolutely believe in young people doing things and the student voice, young person's voice, and so on. And to embed this work in everything that we do. And I think that's been very difficult for teachers because curricula have been so prescriptive. It's been very hard to do it, and the sector's not very rich. And also we're massively subject to regulation, although again, perhaps there are some shoots in relation to regulation perhaps easing off a bit. So we don't have very much money and we don't have very much time, but as always with teachers, they're great at doing things when they don't have very much money and very much time, because if they think it matters, they do it anyway. It's one of the reasons that I love working with teachers. So there's loads of capability, if not loads of capacity, but that means there's loads of help. The important thing there is there's loads of help. And we know there are loads of help from people, like the people sitting here on my left, but loads of other people like Chester Zoo, people who've developed curricula, people who help us do all those kind of things. So that's there, and it's really important that we access it, because this is such an important issue that the teachers have got that capability, and let's draw on all those resources and all those wonderful things that the sector's doing to be able to support and to be able to work with teachers effectively.
Definitely. I mean, drawing on the resource thing, if we can jump to you, Jess, because obviously you're part of the nature education parks, which is one of those tools that schools could use. Can you speak a little bit more about that, if possible?
Yeah, of course. So one thing that we've been really keen to do with the Nature Park is draw out all the, in my DEFRA days, I would have called them co-benefits, but that actually sounds like they're peripheral. So we've got 5 core aims of the Nature Park, and they're all equally important. So improving well-being of children by them getting outdoors, by taking action, having agency, community cohesion, developing skills for their future. So it might be digital skills with our programme in particular. It's all about habitat mapping using digital tools, communication skills, green skills, whatever they might mean. And then inclusivity, accessibility, reaching, so for us, particularly children who can't do this sort of thing at home, or their school perhaps isn't already so engaged in environmental initiatives, so making this mainstream. And then obviously we have biodiversity gain there as well. But so I think people and planet. So when I was working for UKSSN, I was based out of the charity called Global Action Plan, and their motto is for people and planet. And I think that is absolutely key here. So for schools with all the pressures, for teachers juggling loads of things, tailoring programs, initiatives, kind of rhetoric, aims, so that it's relevant. So we launched the Nature Park on the same day as all the RAC crumbly concrete crisis going on in schools. But actually this is relevant. So improving school grounds, making the general environment in the sort of loosest, broadest term, better for students and staff. So it's about staff well-being as well, is really important. Mental health, obviously huge focus for schools, particularly after COVID and everything. And then obviously aligning with the curriculum. So our resources on the Nature Park are aligned with all different curriculum subjects. So obviously geography, science, but citizenship, we're focusing on maths this year in particular, arts, literacy, English, bringing all that out. And then another thing I picked up from working with loads of teachers and doing my own teaching is it's really quite fun coming up with resources yourself and tailoring things and knowing your pupils and how they'll respond. So leaving flexibility in resources so they can be tailored. I could go on, but I will stop.
Excellent, thank you. And obviously you can go on nature education partners. And that's the thing I think teachers need, is they need those resources to help them. When it's not built into the curriculum, you need to know, well, how do I develop my subject knowledge and my understanding so I can deliver this effectively? So Rich, if you'd like to talk a little bit, because obviously, you know, you've started something from scratch. You've talked before how about it really is possible to have, you know, the academics and the conservation sustainability side by side. So what were some of the challenges you faced, and kind of how have you kind of connected with the environmental sector to do that?
So I think all the time it's about the opportunities of what to do, as we've been hearing, even though there are, of course, challenges. I think what we started with, and this was when I was a head teacher, was to look at every half term and every year and say, what are we covering? What's our general theme? Is it a history, a geography, or a science predominant theme? And how can we bring this message into that learning? So that was really the starting point. We framed the learning around inquiries, so always big questions, and narrowed down to weekly questions. All of this is on our website if you want to look at it. And then we said, who are the partners for this work, and what are the sustainability actions that can come from it? So that was a really interesting exercise. I think it also helped teachers to feel a little bit more relaxed that there were partners, as we're seeing today, who can help and support that process. So don't feel like you've got to do it on your own. We've just done something on a nature premium. Many of you will know of this idea of a nature premium, to give schools funds, very small allocation, but significant. As you say, Janet, teachers can do a lot with a small amount. So giving them a small amount of funding and then saying, okay, what can you do to shift your learning so it's beyond the classroom? And there were 3 key areas. One was resources. The other was to find partners like you and fund your involvement with them so the teacher can step back and actually be a learner, which is a lovely thing, for a session a week maybe, over a half term. And the other was to do training so that the confidence was built and maybe they come back ongoing to support with that. So that was really, really interesting, and it really did prove that if you give a little bit of support in the right areas, you can shift things quite significantly.
Brilliant. That's wonderful to hear, because I know it can be quite daunting thinking about that, how do we take that step to connect with the people in our communities? Where are these people that can help us? And sometimes I know as a school teacher, you're kind of in your daily grind every day, you're just trying to get through the curriculum. And sometimes it needs people like Chester Zoo just coming and tapping on our door and saying hello and starting that, partnership and relationship, and being able to understand each other's needs. So if there's any kind of advice that you'd like to kind of give to the environmental sector, saying, how they could best support schools, what would that be? Anybody want to start with that?
I was thinking when you said, Richard, I think teachers are doing loads of this stuff already, but sometimes they don't know they're doing it, and it's not always signposted. And I think sometimes it doesn't need very much to make a much bigger impact. And I'm trying to think desperately of an example now, and of course I can't think of one, but you're nodding at me, so I suspect you've got an example of where that works.
I'm sure I have. Yeah, I think it is about seeing the small, always it's about the small steps, isn't it? The ways in to it to help. I was actually thinking of a really nice example. We have a year 1 inquiry on wildflowers and a year 2 inquiry on bees and pollinators, and then we get year 2 to teach year 1 about the bees and the pollinators, and the year 1s to share back their learning about flowers, which year 2 have already done, so they know about it. But a school we were working with in southeast London were learning about wildflowers with their year 1s. They gave them little cards, they went into the local park, and they learnt about the local wildflowers, things that maybe some of you do anyway. But what was lovely was the children then said at the end of the week, can we take these cards home, because we want to teach our parents. And our families, we want them to know what we know. And it just felt like, we talk about sustainability as something we need to do for the future. Of course, we need to do it now. And it feels like those kind of activities where children are taking stuff home because of the inspiration they've got from their session, with example to things that you do. And that's a really nice way of establishing that change, that shift.
I know we touched on in our conversations, Jess, about that kind of, I was really interested as well, intergenerational, and, if community partners, environmental, organisation are working with schools, it isn't just about the young people. Could you speak a little bit more about that?
Yeah, this came up in one of the sessions I was in earlier, actually, that, as you're probably aware, there's quite a lot of research into not burdening young people, that this is their problem, and you just hand it over to them and sort of enable them and empower them. In various sort of roles I've done, we've done intergenerational things. So, UK School Sustainability Network was all about that. It was bringing, and I'm not going to use the word teachers or educators, it was school staff in general. You had estates managers, you had cover teachers, librarians, heads, a whole range working with students. And so they're making those connections. So there'll be students that have never spoken to someone on the estates side of the school, and they're learning all about the challenges they have. And it means you can come up with much more workable solutions, rather than, because it can be quite idealistic, obviously, working on environmental issues. So, and then you get all these other benefits of community cohesion and empathy and all that sort of thing, both ways. And then we've been doing a similar thing with the Nature Park. So we had a pilot phase, actually working with a lot of settings in the Manchester area. So our key partner is Royal Horticultural Society. And they've been leading a lot on the pilot and how to engage schools, and they've got regional teams. They'll soon be in all 9 English regions. So we had that pilot phase, and now we've just been setting up a schools forum. So we did call it an intergenerational forum, and we got some feedback that it sounded like kind of grannies and kids, which would have been great, but we meant more like sort of school staff and students. Anyway, so we've been bringing together pupil staff from 6 schools across the country that are doing Nature Park, bringing them together in person at the museum and then online, different ages, different backgrounds, and it's remarkable how quickly particularly with the environment topic, they can find ways to come together and immediately kind of get started discussing. So again, it's that co-benefit thing. They're developing so many other skills, and almost the environment topic it's not incidental, because that's why they're there and that's what we're working on. But yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Jess. So I just want to move on a little bit to talking about particular teacher voice. So, when you're setting up your projects and you're doing your work, how have you included teacher viewpoints and voice, and what worked well to help understand what teachers needed and what was maybe a bit more challenging? Richard, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about kind of teacher voice and viewpoints.
Well, as you all know, you have to start by listening to finding out what are the challenges, but also where they are with their curriculum and how this way of learning can inform that. And I think so long as they've had a chance to explain their reality and the world that they're in and the things that they're doing already, then it's a matter of saying, how do we enhance that? How can we add even more value? I think it also goes back to this point earlier that it can't be seen as another thing to do. So all the time it's about just shifting the focus from doing it that way in the classroom to this way outdoors. And one of the things we're looking at, Jess, you talked earlier about the subject areas you can feed it through. We're looking very specifically at science right now and just saying every lesson in every year group, how do you take that piece of learning in a book, often very disconnected from seasonality and things like that. They're still, they're doing flowers in the middle of winter. How do you take that out into the playground initially? If there's green space there, maybe into the community. So really just helping them to move that journey across and out. And, coming back to this point earlier, we all know how important it is for our young people to have well-being in nature. My youngest is autistic. She really struggles to sit in a classroom all day, and then we get the fallout of that when she comes home. We need this for their well-being as well. So, and of course, as you've said earlier, the teachers too.
And you were kind of blessed in setting up your project and being really invested in transforming the whole curriculum. Not all schools are that brave and are able to do that. And I know you talked a lot about, the kind of getting involved in environment and nature can also be in those extracurricular activities, playtimes, lunchtimes, there's other opportunities. So how have you kind of supported your teachers in that?
I think, interestingly, I'm keen to see how it can go mainstream. Because I think we've had a lot of eco clubs, we've had a lot of extracurricular, but that's only for a small number of children. And this is a right for all our children, isn't it? We want all of them to be involved. So for me, I think as a head, it was about how to make sure every child in this school, particularly those who need it, are able to access it. And then to this point of bringing the learning to life. I actually look at some learning in schools, I just think it's dead learning. And you look at children and they're really bored by it. And yet when they have this spark of seeing things in the real world, that's when the joy comes, actually, isn't it?
Yeah, bringing that learning to life is key. Real world learning that's going to help them for the future, isn't it, as well? Is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, can I add to that? The schools that I've been into recently, this is driven by the young people very often. So they're the ones who are saying, oh, well, does that not link to whatever it is? Or have you thought about that? Or, Miss, should you be throwing that cup away? Or all of that sort of stuff, where I think we've come through a bit of a culture over the last however many years of doing things to our teachers and to our young people rather than doing things with our teachers and our young people. And I think it's really important that we listen to that and that we say, oh, actually, yeah, you're right. And so when little Samaya says, can I take that card home? It's, of course you can. Should have thought about that before. What a great idea. Come on, Samaya, let's make sure that everybody's got those things. And I think the more that young people lead this, what I'm seeing in schools at the moment is that really inspires and empowers as well. It's great that that's happening.
Yeah, because I think that, you've said it all, listening. And I suppose, Jess, when you kind of set up nature parks, like, what was the involvement in teachers in listening to think, well, what do they actually need and how can that be applied?
Yeah, so I think one of the main reasons I wanted to work on the nature park is actually because it's coming from the Department for Education, which some people might think, oh my gosh, that sounds like quite challenging. But that gives it the potential to be mainstream. that it's got that authority, it's official. Everything we produce has to go through a very strict quality assurance process. So, for example, we have Royal Meteorological Society checking all the climate science facts. We have to check against, impartiality, and ensuring we're not causing anxiety. So I think that collaborating with DFE has been, and they're in touch with all their colleagues. So we're working with the sustainability unit, but they can contact all their colleagues about workload pressures, everything else that's going on across the education sector. And I think one of the big challenges here is the sector is so diverse, and that's an opportunity and a challenge. So for Nature Park, one of the quite unusual things, well, A, it's coming from DFE, it's not from DEFRA or Natural England or a green NGO, and B, in our remit is all nurseries, all primaries and secondary schools, and all colleges, which is massive. And then we have within that PRUs, SEND settings, it's massive scope. So, in terms of teacher voice, so I mentioned we had this pilot phase, that was really crucial. We've also got quite a big partnership, so MMU are involved, I can see Liz there. Natural History Museum, very experienced in education projects, loads of schools come to the museum every year. Same with RHS, got its big campaign for school gardening project, which I think has 50% of schools doing it. And then we have Learning Through Landscapes, who specialise particularly in early years, an outdoor classroom day. Lots of other partners as well, I can't name everyone. And Esri that are developing these digital tools. So it's a big GIS company. So all those organisations, Royal Geographical Society, Royal Society, I now nearly know them all bring their expertise and their research. So we want this to be, well, it is evidence-based. So we've got scientists in the museum who are devising the guidance, working with Esri on the habitat mapping tools, so that this is rigorous, really high quality. I think that's really respected by teachers. And then ongoing, we've got all sorts of systems for getting teacher voice in. We look at all the analytics behind the website, the digital tools to see how they're being used, and then we adapt. We had a maths teacher co-creation workshop to look at those resources. We, as I mentioned, the schools forum, then we get a lot of mailbox inquiries, and we interact directly with teachers that might be struggling with the habitat mapping, because it's really quite daunting, having to download these tools and work with children to map your site. So, yeah, look, I think there's no one size fits all, so you have to try lots and lots of different things. And just one last thing from me on this is I think not to fall into the trap of reacting to anecdotal feedback, because there's a lot of people who have been doing this for a very long time and are really, really committed and might sort of come to you wanting to do things and wanting to influence, if you like, but then you're not getting to everybody else who's never done this before. So I think there's a lot of surveys and questionnaire data out there, and not making any assumptions, because sometimes things might be a bit counterintuitive. And we're really happy. So we've got 1 in 8 schools and colleges registered for Nature Park in our first year. And of those, 30% are not doing any other environmental schemes, because we asked them on registering. And that for us, that's our biggest achievement, because we're getting to those, because it's so random who's doing something, because it's basically based on an individual member of staff's commitment and kind of getting it.
And that's really important, like my school, Richard, if you've got leadership that are really passionate about conservation, sustainability, they're going to come to you and they're going to come and find you and say, can you come into our schools? But it is that outreach to those organisations, schools that maybe are kind of on the edge. And like I say, it's great that those those schools are now dipping their toes into the nature education part, then fingers crossed, that will snowball and grow into something bigger, which is really important. We all said before we started we could probably be here till 5 o'clock talking about this because we're so passionate, but we do want to hand it over to you now, to the room or anybody online who would like to ask any questions to our panel about, you know, working with teachers. So I'll give you a minute to have a think. There we go. I think we've got a question in the middle there.
Sorry, we've got a question from online, just while we turn on the microphone in the room.
We can go with that one then.
So it's an anonymous question saying, some research suggests that primary school education should focus more on nature connectedness, meaning perhaps lots of lessons about biodiversity loss and climate change should come at a later date. However, there is currently a huge effort to teach young children about these things, including NGOs set up for this purpose. Do the panel have any thoughts or on balancing lessons/messages to empower rather than terrify young people?
Yeah, does anybody want to talk a bit about eco-anxiety? Richard?
I think it's a really good question, and we absolutely don't want to be scaring our young people. And so I think particularly in the younger years, you will know this, it's absolutely much better to focus on the joy of being in nature and just connecting to that world. As they get a bit older, maybe upper primary, you can start to address the messages, or the bigger picture messages, maybe climate crisis and so on, but it has to be within the context of empowerment. The first project we did on energy and climate was to highlight it very briefly, but then to say it's about action now. So year 6 monitored our energy, radically reduced our consumption, and they rewarded the school. Every week we kept below the targets that they had set. And then we went to the community, and they took the message to the community of 100 Club to keep your electricity below 100 kilowatt hours a week. It was so simple, but it was about action for them. They weren't then worried about climate change. Some of them maybe, but for the most part, they just saw their role. So that became then what we call great works, that at the end of every half term of learning, you do something to celebrate what you have done. And pretty well always it's got a sustainability agenda. The one last thing on the energy was they carved a beautiful ice sculpture of a penguin. They were learning about Antarctica. And within 2 days, the penguin, which was right at the front of the school so everyone could see it, had of course melted. They did it in February. But it was so powerful for them. Something beautiful that they had created that just disappeared before their eyes. So yeah, we have got to be very age appropriate and age sensitive. Good question.
Anybody else want to add to that question, Jeff?
I would totally agree with that, and we've been so careful with that, with all the resources going from early years through to older. I would add that I think being part of something bigger is really helpful for young people, including little ones. So knowing that they are part of a wider project, that there's other schools doing this, also the intergenerational point, that working on this with adults, that adults are responsible. It's not all on them. I mean, that's why I set up UK to Zen, so that individuals in schools knew they weren't alone. And then when I took, these are obviously not little children, but when I took teenagers to COP26, they had such fun. They'd never ever met in person. You know, we stayed in youth hostel, it was brilliant. They were just laughing all the time whilst tackling these enormous issues. And then we went to Whiteham Woods, owned by Oxford University, and, you know, again, talking about biodiversity crisis, but doing like a moth trap, and they found purple emperor butterflies. So these 2 lads got up really early, and I was like, what are they up to? Where are they? And they came back with photos of purple emperor butterflies. And so that sort of doing things together, knowing you're part of a regional, nationwide, global effort, I think really helps ease the anxiety. And I think Caroline Hickman, who's done a lot of research into eco-anxiety, would say it's a totally normal response as well. So to feel anxiety about it is a normal response. And I think there's a Clover Hogan quote, isn't there? I just saw it on social media the other day. The problem is not the eco-anxiety of young people, it's that the people in charge don't have it, or something like that.
Very well said. Yeah, definitely. I think there's so much to be said about that joy, they just connect with nature. And you know, it is sometimes for the adults to worry about those big things, but if you're creating opportunities for them to make a difference in their little sphere, in their little bubble in their life, then that's really going to empower them and give them agency as well. Yeah, go on,
Can I add a little bit to that? You just mentioned about, I saw it on social media. I think we need to be very aware of what our young people are seeing on social media and how that can very often feed this eco-anxiety. And I think we all know that young people are seeing all kinds of things that we quite often wish they weren't. And so it's really, really important that from a young age, we're giving them exciting things to do, which are real, which might be outside, that might be something that's tactile, that's something which is collaborative and collegial. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't be doing the digital stuff at all, but I think we need some kind of temper for that says, yes, you might have seen all that. And they will have seen things like climate change deniers, even at a very, very young age. And it's really, really important that we go ahead and we do something that's real and that's meaningful for them to try and temper what's going on, mitigate the effects of that.
Completely agree. Thank you.
Can I just mention this sustainability lead role? Because I think that's not enough. I think it then delegates it to one teacher in a school, and the rest of the staff potentially will say it's not so much my responsibility now. So I think we absolutely should be looking at it around leadership for sustainability. And of course, that's at all levels. It's the school leaders, it's the subject leaders, it's the teachers, and most importantly, it's the children. And I think that's where this agency around the role that they play as leaders and seeing themselves as leaders is really critical.
Thank you. Thank you. We had another question in the middle of the room here, I think. Thank you. Thank you.
Hello. Yes. Hi. So I work for a local authority as a school sustainability lead, but I gave up teaching in July this year. I was that enthusiastic, teacher who wanted to take forward the eco team and drive sustainability initiatives. And I was, quite frankly, worn down by the lack of engagement from SLT. And I just think with the curriculum review going on, there's a huge opportunity to change the narrative and to bring in sustainability so that school leaders start realising it is something that can be integrated in the curriculum. I was just wondering if your input has been sought at all in that curriculum review. And if it hasn't, I don't know if it works like that, maybe you have to engage with them. But what would you want to come out of that curriculum review?
This is a really hot topic. Obviously, it just closed the curriculum and assessment review on Friday. I know organisations like Chester Zoo, and I'm sure many others in the room have submitted their kind of responses to that. I know where we stand on what the changes. I mean, unfortunately, they're talking about evolution, not revolution, but we do hope there are going to be some big changes. So do anyone want to talk about what you'd want the key messages to be?
So my key message in relation to this is we've talked a little bit about leadership and about how it's just not one person's. And I would absolutely agree, it's youth leadership, young people leadership's key here. But I would like to make a distinction between distributed leadership and collective leadership in relation to this. That this is something that is all our responsibility, and that is something that we all need to lead on. And I've done it when I was a teacher in school as well, and somebody would say, oh, well, so-and-so's leading on whatever it is. And I kind of went, oh, good. That's something that I don't have to do because Bill is doing it or whatever it is, because I've got plenty to do because I'm pretty busy as a teacher in school. And this is an area that we can't give up on, and there is something that is interesting for everybody. So it's embedding it through everything and looking at that sense of collective leadership. It's absolutely key, working with our expert partners. In schools as teachers, we don't have to be experts. We've got the experts out there. You've got Manchester Met University colleagues here. We've got Chester Zoo. We've got you. Please use those things as well. You don't have to do everything because I know you're already exhausted.
Couple of points. I'll try and be quick. I can see the time. So some of this is sort of my personal thoughts from over the years, and then some things we're doing at the moment. So I would say sustainability, climate, environment is maybe a little bit like safeguarding was in schools, I don't know, a decade ago, when people started to realise it was really important, life and death, but it was probably loaded on one person, and now it's totally recognised, I hope, in every single education setting. It's everyone's responsibility. Everybody has training on it at the beginning of every year and has to use the system for, you know, low-level concerns and so forth. So, and there's also an argument that climate is a safeguarding issue as well. So I think it's getting there. I do think that the DFE programmes will help because they make this mainstream and kind of expected. So the Climate Ambassadors programme that's just kicked off, our programme and the strategy, yes, can absolutely pick holes, want things to go further and everything. I think that, you know, that will affect head teachers, governors, and then I think all the organisations that bring together those groups are trying. So Association of School College Leaders, National Governance Association, NAHT, NEU, are all putting sessions into conferences and putting on webinars and training and so forth. So it's very piecemeal because of the stage we're at. But I think it's getting there. I am worried that so many teachers are leaving, a lot who have been working on sustainability because it's exhausting. And a lot of them are coming to work on our projects. And, you know, people, a lot of events I go to are former teachers who are now trying to influence from outside of the sector. Yeah, and then just my other point is I think there's obviously a general lack of eco-literacy in the general population. So anything you're all doing and the media's doing to raise general understanding helps the education sector because most people have something to do with a school or our parents or whatever. So I think coming at it from all sides hopefully galvanises and therefore makes heads and SLT realise they need to support those trying to do it.
Thank you. And I think just as a reference point, I don't know if you know the curriculum for Wales. I don't know if anyone here is from Wales. Fantastic. So there's a beautiful word in Welsh, and I don't know if I can pronounce it right. I think it's cnefin, which is a sense of place, a sense of rootedness. So a lot of the Welsh curriculum is around this word cnefin, and it's helping schools to take ownership of their curriculum, to make it relevant to their place, their geography, their community, often very diverse communities, which is, again, fantastic. You can celebrate diversity in community and diversity in the biodiversity of nature, and the history of a place and so on. So I think if I want one thing from the review, it is space. Just space to give people time to breathe and to own and to bring back this love of learning, which some, not all, but some teachers have lost. So I think that's really, really important. What's interesting is we're starting to work with a lot of farms nationally. They're organic regenerative farms. So we've got 50, and 15 of them are doing education work, some near here. And where I'm inviting them to develop their work with young people from urban areas particularly, and to start to reconnect them to the story of their food. But the starting point was the teachers and the head teachers. So we've just run a session with a group of head teachers on a farm. And we said, don't go to a hotel for your conference. Come to a farm or one of your beautiful places. It was amazing to see head teachers like children pulling up carrots and getting all excited as they munch them. So I think we need this all levels of reconnection. And if we can do that and we have the space to do that, then I think that the future can be bright. We're all a bit unsure at the moment, but hopefully it can be.
A tipping point here, aren't we? But hopefully, you know, the positive messages you've sent about what is actually happening, you know, across the country related to conservation education does give us hope. And I love that collective leadership I think is so, so important. You know, it's not just one person's responsibility, and that's about building, you know, across the school community and beyond into the local community as well, working collectively together. And just, you know, listening to schools, listening to teachers, and reaching out. I'm sorry we've come to the end of our session now. We don't have any time, but if you want to catch the panel afterwards and ask us any questions, we'd be more than welcome to answer them. So thank you so much to our panel today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.